This week, we're gonna be recreating this stop motion effect where it looks like we're kind of swiping through some doors. Welcome to my channel. I'm Scott Herder, a videographer based out of Brooklyn, New York, who specializes in time-lapse and hyperlapse and kind of blending them all together. This is week 3 of a series where I try to recreate different time-lapses or different techniques that I was inspired by. And if you're liking the series so far, please consider subscribing to see the evolution of this weekly challenge. This was inspired by 3 different creatives. First and foremost, we have Guy Roland, who created the first ever, or it's considered the first ever hyperlapse in this film Pacer. Then we also were inspired by a sense of humor, which has like this really cool looking at his feet. And also the hand gestures are inspired by Sweat Engine. So heading into this, I think that the hardest part is definitely gonna be aligning them all and just making it look as perfect as possible. What I think is crazy is that when Guy Roland created this technique, he did it all using film, which is insane. All right, so let's get into the shooting. So we're gonna start with the feet segment. So to do this, I'm just putting the camera into high burst mode and taking photos of me walking. And I'm gonna use the camera leash against my neck to keep everything in the same position. And then I just want to walk to a bunch of different locations. And anytime the ground is changing and interesting, I'm just going to take a photo of me walking 4 steps. Again, the leash is gonna be kind of braced against me to keep it in position. A couple of the mistakes that I made was I didn't shoot at 1/200th of a second when I was first starting out, and when I got back into the editing room, I had a lot of blurry photos, so I had to go back out there and redo it again, just making sure that my shutter speed was above 1/200th of a photo. And then the other issue that I ran into was sometimes I walked a little bit slower, sometimes I walked a little bit faster, and I just had this really inconsistent look, so I had to go back out again and just make sure that I was already walking as I began to shoot. When it came to walking up to the door, I just was firing in burst mode and just got into the position that I wanted. And then I just waited for the camera buffer to fill up. And I just put my hand in front of my camera and stuck my finger out like I was swiping down and tilted my camera up as I took photos until it was framed to the door. And once I did that, I added my hand back and acted like I was swiping the door. Then I'd walk to the next position and add my finger in the next few door shots on the same street, so my finger just kind of looked like it was in for a couple of frames, just kind of swiping across. For editing that part, there wasn't really anything to do, just a batch edit in Lightroom where I copied and pasted all the settings. And in my editing software, all I had to do was cut a match shot on the very left step. So basically just take 2 steps and cut and try to align the feet the best I could. So I had all my footage set to 24 frames per second, and it just seemed way too fast. So I played around with it and I found that 8 frames per second was the effect that I liked the best. Okay, so now let's talk about shooting the doors and the roofs. For the doors, I did a similar thing to just shooting a hyperlapse. I found an anchor point that I just used at the top of the door. And for the lines or something to kind of keep me at the same distance, I just used the edge of the sidewalk, just wherever my feet could fit on. Because it was just impossible to keep the exact same spot because sometimes there was trees or people, or sometimes there wasn't, like the sidewalks are just totally different sizes. So I shot this for about 100 doors, and then once I found a really cool blue door, I just thought this would be a good place to switch positions. And so I just inserted my hand and just swiped up and then changed this to the door and just repeated that all the way through for about another 100 roofs. So then in the editing software, I just copied and pasted all of the settings from the boots to the doors and to the roofs, exported them out into a video, and this is exactly what it looked like out of camera. And it's just really jumpy and just looks absolutely god-awful. The next thing we have to do is just wrangle it into place, and that's gonna be the time-consuming part. And again, what I think is crazy about this is that Guy Roland shot all of this on film and had to manually align it, and I don't even know what the process is for doing that. I'm just grateful I have a computer. And so this is where you're definitely gonna want to put on some music and just kind of get into a groove, because this is gonna be super time consuming. Because you're gonna have to manually adjust the scale, the position, and the rotation for each frame by frame, and just go through the whole thing. Use the guidelines and rulers to kind of help you align the doors. And if you do this like what I did, where there's so many different types of doors, which I had no clue that there were so many different door shapes. I highly recommend grouping these and color coding them and organizing them first before you do the position, scale, and rotation, because it's gonna get really jarring seeing doors switch from square to round and all the different shapes. You kind of want to have it slowly transition from the shapes and then back again. Trust me, you're gonna save yourself a huge headache. When adjusting the doors, you're gonna want to use rulers, and sometimes when the widths get really different, you're gonna have to unlink the scale to adjust the scale height and width differently, just to kind of like squish it into place and just get better alignment. During this process, take your time and just repeat until you're at the end of the sequence, and eventually you'll have your finished sequence. And the biggest key to this is just being patient, because this absolutely sucks to edit, but what's worse than doing it once is having to do it multiple times. So just take your time and just go through it. And when you're done, this is the effect. You get a stop motion kind of time lapse that looks like this. So I've been experimenting with this during the winter, and I just really like the way that the snow kind of plays with it. So hopefully we get some more snow and I can continue trying this and figure out a way to add to the effect. All right, well, that is it for this video, and I have finally had a week where I've figured out what I'm gonna try next week, and it is this awesome video by Kevin P. Barry, where he has animated a stop motion of himself slapping around himself and playing around in his home office. And so my idea for that is gonna be, I'll be working here on the computer and then animating like all of my camera equipment, setting up and taking my own self-portraits, and then just coming back to the desk and editing it. So I have no idea how to do any of that, so it should be both terrifying and fun at the same time. So lastly, I know that this is a bit of departure from most of my time-lapse and hyperlapse stuff, but it's still using a lot of the same techniques that I teach in my time-lapse and hyperlapse course. So if you're curious about making time-lapse and hyperlapses like this, sign up for my newsletter where I send discounts to the course. All right, well, happy shooting. I'm Scott, and I'll see you next time.